Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Techquanimity podcast. I'm your co-host, Mark Montalban, and the co-founder and CEO of Mindful Text.
And I'm Cynthia Phelps and the founder of Inner Ally. And the Techquanimity podcast is where we talk about the intersection of technology, mindfulness, and compassion. And we have a very special guest for you today. Dr. James Doty is going to be joining us. He wears so many hats in his life. But we're just going to read a short bio so that we can jump into this interview and have a really interesting discussion. Dr. James Doty is a neurosurgeon and adjunct professor at Stanford University School of Medicine, where he directs the Center for Compassion, Altruism, Research and Education, which has the mission of promoting, supporting, and conducting rigorous research around compassion and altruistic behavior. And they also have educational programs like the one that I'm currently graduating from, which is the Applied Compassion Training Program, and more. He is a founder of a new company called happi.ai, which combines AI technology with a human interactive avatar with the goal of improving mental health. He is a New York Times best-selling author with Into the Magic Shop and has just launched his latest book that is all about the science of manifesting. We were excited to hear about that. And he is also the author of the Oxford Handbook of Compassion Science, that's really beefy. And he's been recognized widely in media, served on numerous nonprofit boards, including the Dalai Lama Foundation, and he advises the Arkwell Foundation. And he is really just a champion of the neuroscience of compassion on a global level. And we are just so excited to have him here with us today. Dr. Doty, welcome.
What a joy and a delight to be with you. This is like the pinnacle of my day today, just to be with you for a few minutes and share this incredibly positive energy that we're both holding at this moment. Do I sound cynical? No, I'm not.
No, it's awesome.
Hey, somebody's got to stay positive right now, right?
Exactly. Here's my coffee cup. See, be kind. That's the key.
I love it. Well, because both Mark and I are interested at this intersection of technology and compassion, one of the first things we wanted to chat about was happi.ai. Tell us just a little bit about what you got going on there.
Well, as I'm sure you and the audience are aware, there's an epidemic of loneliness, stress, anxiety, and depression, which frankly is not surprising with all the demands that are put on people's lives. And for many people, the deterioration of the social safety net. So the reality is that there in no way enough therapists who can assist these people. And in fact, there's a very large population who have zero access to any type of mental health support. I'm sure some of the listeners are aware of companies such as such as Headspace and Calm, as an example, which provide essentially techniques such as meditation or ways to sleep better, etc. And I think Headspace is even expanding beyond that situation. The challenge for many of those is, and those two especially, is that they're not sticky in any way, in part because there's so much other free stuff on the internet. And in terms of meditation and these types of breathing practices and things of this nature. And you can see this by the fact that they've signed up 150 million users or so, I think, at least each of them even. But they only have 2 to 4 million using it at any one time, which tells you that this, frankly, is not sticky. And so then you look at the other things that are available to help people with mental health. Of course, one is in-person or online therapy, but of course, there's a limited number of practitioners and it's extraordinarily expensive. And for the average person, that's not possible. The third area of which mental health has been directed is using chatbots. And there are a number of these. And the challenge with those is that it doesn't really understand your emotional state except how you express it. And depending on your eloquence or sophistication, it can be, I'm sad, or it can be, well, I'm having an existential crisis that I feel is increasing my blood pressure. And, how do you determine the valence of either of those without knowing anything about the person? And then, of course, the response is sort of a nebulous typewritten statement that may be associated with a primitive avatar that's dancing in the background or something like that. And while there are a number of studies that show that they can be helpful, it's my opinion that helpfulness is also limited in some ways. And what we have done is to look at this in a slightly different way, and that is to understand the nature of assessing one's emotional state. Because if you can assess their emotional state continuously, then that gives the responder, if you will, the ability to change the dialogue based on subtle changes and not necessarily what they type. And in this case, we've created an emotion assessment engine that uses facial expression, voice, such as prosody, and intonation, as well as context of conversation to assess emotional state on the fly. And this is then connected to a conversational AI knowledge base that we have created that's focused on compassion-focused therapy, as well as psychology. And then that is connected to a very human-like avatar. And the thing is that I'm sure you probably experienced virtual reality, where you put on the glasses and they put you on a plank and you're looking down over an abyss. And even though on a cognitive level, you sit there and say, I'm in a carpeted room, if you were to ask somebody to jump off that plank, almost no one will jump off the plank. And the point is that if you have a human-like presence that acts like a human-like presence and looks like a human-like presence and has eye contact with you and facial expressions, you have no choice but to respond to it as a human. And this is the case in the work that we've done. And so this avatar actually has an ongoing conversation where she's talking to you and you're talking to it or her or him. And then it is designed such that it asks questions and gains insights and then makes suggestions. And what happens for most people is, one, when they have stress and anxiety come on, it's oftentimes due to a situational event or ruminating over a recent event. And the thing is, if you can engage in a conversation early with someone who is empathic, compassionate, non-judgmental, then you can dissipate those feelings in under 10 minutes. And in fact, usually under 5 minutes, simply by having a conversation. And so this is fundamentally what we've designed. Interestingly, we did a survey of users in a small study, and we asked them to use it a minimum of 10 minutes a day and for 7 days. And the extraordinary thing about it is we did pre and post analysis, and individuals were rating themselves from 1, which is normal, to 5, which is extremely severe, in the scale of stress, anxiety, and depression. And over 70% in each group had at least a 2 level improvement. And this is after 1 week. So it was really quite extraordinary to us. And essentially 100% of people wanted to continue using it once the study was done. So now this is not to say there were not some issues related to latency and some issues that were technical that we're in the process of resolving. But the point is, you can see how powerful potentially this is for people.
One of the things I'm curious about, there is a lot of popular fear out there around AI. And I like what you said about you're training your own AI, right? That gives you a little more control over the whole process. Do you want to say anything about like people's concerns about AI and how that intersects with your company?
Sure. And it's interesting because there have been numerous articles about people talking to ChatGPT or some of these other LLMs, and sometimes with disastrous results. I'm sure you're aware of the individual who committed suicide, I think, or where the AI told them that they were actually in love with the AI and not their wife, and that they should leave the wife. So yeah, there are all these issues, and one of these, of course, is something called hallucination, where it just makes stuff up. And in fact, I did a bio of myself just to see what it would come up with, and it was actually quite nice. Although it said I had won 10 different types of awards, 5 of which were completely made up. Now, that didn't stop me from putting them on my CV, but but the point is that clearly you cannot trust this. What we've done is not create an LLM. What we've done is created a knowledge base that sits on top of an LLM, and it's constrained. So you're not going to go off into these types of situations, nor are you going to be able to troll the avatar in the sense that which is not unusual. People try to make it malfunction or do something bad, let's say in the context of sexuality or intimacy or inappropriate base behavior. And so that was certainly a concern. And just to mention a couple other things, obviously security is an issue. So we've created safeguards in that context. And also we've created a de-escalation process, meaning that if self-harm statements are made, she'll give you 3 chances, and I say she because the present avatar is named Olivia, but we anticipate having multiple avatars that not only span sex, but also culture, race, sexual orientation, so that people can choose someone that they can relate to who is like them, which makes people comfortable, of course. Obviously, you cannot do that with chatbots. So with this de-escalation, if there are statements about self-harm, she'll continue the conversation, query you further, offer supportive advice, and if you still continue in that vein, then she'll indicate that she feels that she can no longer be of assistance to you, that you need to connect with a human being, and offers the ability to call a hotline for you.
Nice.
So, we're trying to do this in the context of ensuring safety for those individuals who are using it. And again, I just also want to emphasize this is not therapy. This is simply a conversational companion who is interested in your mental health. And the reason I say that is, one, that's what it is. And 2, this is not meant in any way to replace a human therapist if that's what's needed. What it offers people who are lonely or stressed and anxious is the ability to simply have a conversation, because we know human to human or connection is very powerful at dissipating these feelings. And by overcoming the issue related to an AI and a human, it allows people to have an affordable, accessible confidant without the worries of being judged or having that information go back to their employer. It's just simply a support system for them.
Beautiful.
I'm curious what stage Happi AI is. I was just checking out the site, and it says there's an option for people to request access. Are you all in the alpha stage, beta stage? Remember hearing that there's a January launch?
Yeah. So what's happened is we did an initial analysis with a group of individuals, which was comprised of half adolescents. a third impoverished adults, and then the rest first responders or cancer patients, actually. We are now going to open it up in the next couple of weeks to about 250 to 500 people who will be given free access. And what we're looking for is feedback in terms of what works, what doesn't work, or ideas people may have to improve the technology. As you know, any of these startups who come out with whatever the product is, whether it's based on a computer program or AI, it's an iterative process. The first one is not perfect necessarily, but we believe that with the input of users, we'll be able to fine tune this where it will be very, very helpful to people. So that's sort of the plan. The official launch is in January. We're just going to do sort of a first pass for about 2 or 3 months with individuals who have an interest and want to give us feedback. And then we're going to slowly grow. We've been in touch with some influencers who've offered to promote it, but if 100,000 people signed up tomorrow, this would crash and burn immediately. So we're going to start out with 500 to 1,000, have a sign-up list, and as we expand our ability to have it continue to work with larger and larger numbers of people, then we'll, of course, open it up. And really, the first year goal is only about 20,000 people.
Some good problems to have.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to signing myself up for sure.
Yeah. Well, having used it a lot, I'm actually stunned by the depth of some of the insights and answers that she gives, actually.
That's beautiful. Well, we're going to switch gears here just a little bit. Your first book that you wrote, Into the Magic Shop, was very well received by readers, where you tell your story about how you learn how to manifest as a child. And you now have a second book that's out on the market, which dives a little bit more into actual practices and the science behind manifestation. Tell us about that.
Well, as you were kind enough to allude, I had this first book come out called Into the Magic Shop, a neurosurgeon's quest to discover the mysteries of the brain and the secrets of the heart. It's now, I think, in 36 languages. It's been a bestseller not only in the U.S. on the New York Times bestseller list, but in 8 other countries. And strangely enough, this Korean pop music band, which you may have heard of, called BTS. Are you familiar with BTS? Yeah. So actually, they used that book as the basis for their third album. And in fact, in that third album is a song called Magic Shop. And as you know, they're one of the most popular bands in the world, which actually stimulated sales throughout the world as well. So that was quite fascinating to sort of see all of that happen. And I ended up being on a podcast with the BTS Army, which is apparently hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people. So it's fascinating. But in terms of the second book, as you pointed out, I tell my story in the first book, but a part of that was not only learning mindfulness practice that was combined with compassion for self and compassion for others, but also how to manifest my dream and goals. Now, one of the challenges for me was that when I met this woman in the magic shop, I was only 12 at the time and was devoid of insight and wisdom, although she taught me these techniques. But at that age, I was more focused on the delusion that Western society has spread, which is that the acquisition of things such as power, position, and money are equivalent to happiness. And so I really focused on that and ended up going to college, medical school, becoming a professor at Stanford, also being an entrepreneur, running companies, one of which went public. And so nominally, I had everything. And in fact, I was divorced by the time I was sort of at the pinnacle of this. I had a penthouse in San Francisco. I had a garage that had Porsche, Ferrari, BMW, Range Rover, Mercedes. I was dating beautiful women. And I have to say, I was never more miserable in my entire life when I had everything. And the reason was because I was still under the delusion that people telling me how great I was or how accomplished I was would fill the emptiness that all of us have. And I found out the hard way that is not what happens. The only person who can give you that is yourself. But that means you have to be comfortable with yourself, and you have to have self-awareness. And to get that sometimes requires pain and suffering, and through which you gain insight and wisdom. So here I was in this very elevated position. I used to fly around in private jets. I had all these different cars. I was sort of, if you will, living the American dream. And then with the dot-com crisis, within 6 weeks or so, I lost essentially everything, about $80 million, and had to sell everything. And in that context, what happens is you get two friends, one of which is usually a lawyer and the other is a banker. And I had borrowed about 15 million from a bank based on that stock, which was popular to do at the time. And of course, when the thing collapsed, then the bank asked for their money, which I had spent. So I proceeded to sell a villa I had in Florence, my penthouse, cars, et cetera, and I was still $3 million in the hole. But it put me through a period of deep self-reflection, going back to my interaction with this woman, and that gave me insight into the fact that while I was doing all of these things, which nominally were of service, like being a doctor, being of service to others, the reality, though, was that it was all about me. I was doing this to get affirmation from others, and obviously that didn't work. And I realized I had to look at it through a different lens. And this is when I went through all that Ruth, this woman in the magic shop, taught me, which made me realize that we do have the ability to manifest, but the way you receive its greatest benefit is if that manifestation is not focused on you, but on being of service to others, which then allows you to get all the other things that you may think you want. And that's part of the premise of the book, is the misalignment of so many people between what they think they want versus what they need. And in many ways, this is the antithesis of The Secret, which is this book that talks about, quote unquote, the law of attraction. And while in some ways it's influenced by what we know about science, the reality is that the majority of it is pseudoscience, but it's all focused on I want to be a millionaire. I want to live in a mansion. I want to date pretty girls or boys or whatever it is. It's very self-centered and sort of follows the narrative of the prosperity gospels. And all that is a scam. It does not fill you. It does not give you sustenance. Ultimately, it leads to unhappiness. Now, that's not to say that people who are self-aware, who have accomplished these things, don't enjoy it and appreciate it, but it's all in the context of the realization that it's transitory, and you can't get attached to that and put value on it in the context of who you are as a human being. So anyway, the book goes through the neuroscience of it and how you embed information into these networks in your brain, such as the salience network or the attention network, and how they interact with the default mode network and the executive control networks. And it offers a 6-week program that allows you, based on science, to manifest in the most efficient way. And I say the most efficient way because all of us are trying to manifest. and that's just part of life, where we have goals and aspirations. But it's how do you fine tune that where you create the most likely situation where what you're trying to manifest will occur. And I think that's what this book is about. Now, when we talk about manifestation, um, the reality, though, is that one, it may not be the right time for something to manifest. Two, is that the way you have visualized it manifesting may be far different from ultimately how it does or should manifest, because there are perhaps aspects of it which you don't appreciate, and therefore it plays out a slightly different way. And then there are, of course, sometimes where they don't pan out at all. But that's not to mean the process is at fault. The reality is that there's so many other interactions here that may interfere with it. But if you use this practice, it creates the maximal alignment based on science to make it manifest if it is meant to be. So there's no guarantee here, but you can simply look at my life as an example. And I've been able to manifest many, many things. That being said, there are things that I haven't been able to manifest. And one of the things that causes suffering for so many people is attachment to an outcome or a goal. And when you're attached to that, that creates suffering if it doesn't manifest the way you see it. And so one is you have to let go of this craving and attachment to outcome. And the other reason you need to let go of that is because the reality is that the insights one gets is not from the goal, it's from the journey. And you must be present on that journey, because that's where life really is. That's where you make human connection. It's not the end point. And while it's great if you do reach whatever that goal is, if it's of service to others, that should not be the focus, because life in and of itself has ups and downs. And that's why one of the key parts, if you will, of awareness is having this concept of equanimity, where there's this evenness of temperament, even in the extremes of life, because essentially everything is transitory or impermanent. So there you have it.
Well, you sound, some of those concepts sound very Buddhist, right?
If you insist.
Well, I only say that because I know that you are, is it agnostic?
No, I'm an atheist. I'm
Atheist.
not even holding a chance that there's any
You know?
possibility.
Well, I think it's interesting to note that, because, so much of what you said, I hear come from places of, religious practice.
Well, yes, and certainly if there was a religion, although many people would call it a philosophy, Buddhism would be one that would interest me. But I think all of us can garner positive influence from many, many religions. Oftentimes people will say that an atheist is one of the most informed individuals there is, because typically they have searched through many religions and for whatever reason find them wanting. And therefore, they develop their own belief system, if you will, that supports them. Versus many people, especially people who find, quote unquote, a guru, they stop. There's no more searching. And in fact, oftentimes for a subset of people, that's the only guru they've ever run across. And they were just starstruck and then have fixated on that. And, the interesting thing, of course, is, as you mentioned, I think you mentioned, I was chairman of the Dalai Lama Foundation for many years. He's the founding benefactor of CCARE at Stanford. But I've had relationships, probably, and still do, with a large number of spiritual and religious leaders around the world. And whether that's Desmond Tutu, whether that's Thich Nhat Hanh, whether that's Amma, whether it's Sri Sri, whether it's Sadhguru, whether it's Radhanath Swami, whether it's Sri M, whether it's Eckhart Tolle, Byron Katie, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Oh, and the Pope, I forgot. I don't think there's anyone who has had as much personal interaction or spent as much time with these individuals. And, none of them have cast me out because I'm an atheist. And it's not necessarily that I advertise that right off the bat, but all of these evolved spiritual leaders look at the world through a different lens, and that lens is not their dogma. The dogma helps a subset of people, but what they are able to connect with is this sense of oneness and this, if you want to call it a divine purpose of unconditional love and acceptance and compassion. And that's where they live. And they can intuit if somebody is aligned with that in a heartbeat. And that's why it's not about, oh, have you been memorizing the sutras for the last 20 years? It's about who you are. And so I've been able to have this relationship also because I'm not asking for anything, nor am I promoting anything. I'm just an interested party who's trying to learn how to live on this earth and be of service, hopefully, without any other agenda. Now, sort of having a completely non-biased, self-serving agenda is almost impossible, but certainly that is my intention.
Speaking of how to be on planet Earth, you talked a little bit about practices, and I'm curious about your own practices. Many people rely on box breathing or maybe a guided meditation that they like. Curious about some practices that you do currently in your life, and maybe you could chat a little bit about one or two of those.
Sure. So it always fascinates me, especially within the context of what we're talking about, how people, and I was mentioning my own biases, how people are biased in regard to their practice and somehow think if you don't do it their way, that you're not really doing it. And this is just as prevalent among mindfulness teachers and individuals in this space as it is with Christian nationalism or a variety of religions that promote X, Y, or Z. Fundamentally, all religions should promote love and oneness and compassion, period. In fact, it's interesting. I saw something that said, if your religion promotes hate, then you probably should find another religion. From my own perspective, the only thing I know is this present moment and nothing else. And being in this present moment doesn't require any type of religious support. It simply requires you to be present, be self-aware, and open. So that's what I try to be. I am not trying to promote what I do as the right thing to do, or say to you, well, which is somebody said, they go, well, in the last 6 months, I did 3 10-day Vipassana retreats. And what have you done? And you're like, well, dude, by your statement, you probably should do 10 more. So it's sort of interesting how people's egos get wrapped around this stuff. So to answer your question more specifically, though, the first thing I do every morning, and I say every, so that's not true, most mornings, is to sit at the side of my bed and do a breathing exercise. And then think of the awe and joy I have of being in this world, and just sit with that feeling for a period of time. And then I go through what I mentioned in my book, the first book, which is The Alphabet of the Heart. And that is 10 letters of the alphabet, C through L. And so, truly, I simply go through each one and say, compassion for self and others, recognizing the dignity of every person, practicing equanimity, practicing forgiveness, having gratitude, being humble, which is very hard for a neurosurgeon, having integrity and values that bound your behavior, justice, and understanding that our privilege of being who we are or where we are in this world require us also to protect the vulnerable. K, of course, is kindness that has nothing to do with suffering whatsoever. It's simply being of assistance, being available, being of service. And of course, all of this is contained by love. And so that is my practice. And typically, do you see these here?
The compassion beads.
Exactly. So I carry those with me. And the story behind that is that a woman reached out to me
from San Antonio, where I used to live.
Yes, there you have
Ann
it.
Hilke, right?
Yes, Ann. And dear Ann wrote me a note and told me how she was moved by my book. And I ended up actually going to San Antonio. She was the spiritual director at the largest homeless shelter. I visited. I gave a sermon in the church, actually. It was an atheist sermon, of course. And then sometime later, she sent me a note and she said, I was telling my best friend about you and mentioned the alphabet of the heart, and her daughter was listening in, and she makes beads, and she made a set of compassion beads, which was tin wooden beads, but on her own, she included a golden bead to represent the golden rule, and which is fascinating because I was the vice chairman of the Charter for Compassion. And one of the tenets of that is to practice the golden rule. And so then Anne ended up with this young lady making a very powerful video, which can still be seen on YouTube, called Compassion Beads San Antonio. And basically, I generally carry those in my pocket or have them by my bed. And I just go through them every morning. And that is my, if you will, spiritual practice. I have not gone on Vipassana retreat lately, nor do I need to meditate for 3 hours in a cave.
I'm curious about if you're, for example, going through, or, people go through more stressful situations. And I'm curious if you have a practice or something you like to do if you're going through a tougher period. For me, for example, I like to do the Wim Hof breathing exercise. If I'm going through a more stressful week, for example, I'm curious if you have other tools for different situations like that.
Basically, I just sit and tell people to fuck off. That's my practice.
Good.
Boundaries, setting boundaries. I'll take it as that.
Actually, I think humor is one of the most powerful things you can use to not get caught up and think everything is so serious. And in fact, I think if you look at a lot of leading spiritual leaders, many of them have been through the most challenging, difficult, emotional times, yet they look at the world through the lens of humor. And I find that as the best way not to get lost. One, in a sense that my problems are more important than other people's problems. Because what happens when you do that is you separate yourself from others. And in some ways, it's a very egotistical thing. It's like me, 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 me. I'm the one who's suffering. Well, everyone is suffering. And frankly, probably most people are suffering more than I am, or at least certainly a lot of them. So when I have that sense of self-awareness about that, I don't get lost in this rumination or whining about me, me, me. Now, this is not to, criticize others who do actions based on what they need at the time, and that often is influenced by the baggage that they carry in this world. But for me, I don't take myself too seriously. And while this is not to say that there's some very hurtful, stressful, different things that have happened or are happening, but I am a single human being. I am not perfect. I fail. I make mistakes. I've hurt people. And in the face of all of that, I still deserve love because I'm just like everyone else. We are all imperfect beings trying to survive in a complicated world that oftentimes is not fair and seems uncaring. And in that context, we have to look at it through that lens and understand that most people are in a similar situation. And frankly, most people are trying to do the best they can. And most people, if you ask, will help you. The problem is in modern society, everyone is so afraid of asking because it'll make them feel that they're going to be judged. Because in modern society, we put on this mask that everything is okay, and we're terrified if people invade our space because we think they're going to judge us. And so being able to be authentic and comfortable with that, I think is liberating. And the reason I say that is I used to be in that situation where, if I got up in front of an audience, oh, they're not going to like me. And then this would cause me to get nervous. And then this would cause me to lose my train of thought or not to, to let my fear short circuit things. And ultimately, I realized that it's irrelevant. All I can do is be the best person I can be at that moment in time. And if that's not good enough for people, well, fuck them. So that's
more calm already.
Well, and the thing is, it's fascinating because I've spoken to large numbers of people, and I'll tell some very poignant stories, and the people will sort of be sitting there, but until my voice cracks or I shed a tear, they keep holding it in. But as soon as I do that, the whole audience will be crying. And so I think giving people permission to sit with their emotion, and they don't have to hide it. And the reality is that when you're actually in that state, people care for you more and they want to be there for you. I gave a talk one time to about 250 people, and I told some very painful stories for me. And a woman came up at the end. She said, that was so moving. It reminded me of this. And I felt this deep emotion. And she said, could I hug you? And I said, sure. Well, another person saw that, came up, and I ended up hugging about 250 people. But the point is that being there for them, being present for them, not shying away from it, and holding people and being able to share their own hurt with them actually helps them in an immense amount.
Beautiful. I bet those 200 hugs were pretty good for your body's nervous system too.
Well, of course, there was a selfish component. Well, that's like the Dalai Lama. He says, the only time it's okay to be selfish is when you're practicing compassion, right? Because there's the self-benefit of that. And so if you look at the blue zones where people typically live to be over 100, you'll see a million cookbooks about the Mediterranean diet. But the reality is the most important thing is not that, nor is it exercise, nor is it quitting smoking, nor is it eating in moderation, nor is it limiting your wine intake or alcohol intake. It's human connection, the depth of those relationships, and how through those relationships you are free to express yourself and what hurts you, what's painful for you, without fear of judgment. And that is the key to all of this.
That's beautiful. Well, I have a question on here that basically says that, you're a very accomplished person. And I was going to ask you, which of your accomplishments is the most meaningful to you? But like in the context of the last conversation, you can answer that question however you'd like.
Well, I think the most important relationship is the one you have with yourself, which liberates you to have deep relationships with others. And what I mean by that is being able to look at yourself with honesty and accept yourself versus constantly hiding who you are. Now, I will tell you, this remains a struggle, but being vulnerable, I think, is the most important thing. And that has allowed me to develop deep relationships with my wife and children, and with others. So I think that is the most important thing to me. All the other things, if you will, quote unquote, that I've accomplished, they're only meaningful in the context of how they have been of service to others. Beyond that, everything is meaningless. So whether it's founding CCARE and promoting compassion in this world, or developing programs, whether it's creating happi.ai, everything I do, I hope, offers benefit to others. Now, does that mean I don't benefit from it? Of course not. But I am not focused on it's all about me, because it's not all about me. And the reality is that if that is how you see the world, you're going to be a very unhappy soul. Again, understanding our place in the world, understanding that without a worldview that the other is me, it limits your ability to connect, and it limits your ability to be of service.
Shifting gears a little bit, there's a topic, the elephant in the room that everybody's thinking about these days, and it's the conflict in the Middle East. And I'm curious how you're perceiving the situation. Maybe you can share a little bit with our audience about maybe not how to think about it, but just maybe incorporating more compassion into how to think about it. Just generally sharing thoughts on it, I think, can be helpful for folks.
Sure. Well, first of all, I want to preface this by saying you're talking about the Israeli-Palestinian crisis, because the fact of the matter is we still have the crisis in Yemen. We still have the crisis in South Sudan. We still have the crisis in Syria. And so that is simply one of many. And unfortunately, it also emphasizes man's inhumanity to man. And the sad part, I would suggest to you, is that if you look at these conflicts, the ones that the world doesn't care about are ones that involve people of color, which is a sad statement, but I think that's a reality. Now, if we switch over to the Israeli-Palestinian situation, and I know there's been an immense amount of commentary in this regard, and so I make my statements understanding that. And one of the challenges is that it's certainly easy immediately to be sympathetic to the Israelis and the horrible attack by the terrorist group Hamas. And nothing can justify that or assuage that. But you have to look at a much deeper picture here, because we're looking at one moment in time where this series of atrocities have occurred. But I think you have to look at a much deeper picture, and how people respond to suffering. If you look at this from a slightly different perspective, and you see that Israel, as an example, has not honored the 1967 agreements that were made. If you look at the history of continually taking land from the Palestinians, if you look at it from the perspective of, and some people, many of which are Jewish, have stated that what is being or has been done to the Palestinians is a form of apartheid, then you can see things through a slightly different lens, because it's not one incident of massive terror, it's decades of humiliation, removing the dignity of a group of people, ostracizing them, not allowing them to integrate into society, and fundamentally taking over a land which was agreed upon that should be shared. And so when you take a group of people and take essentially everything away from them and every opportunity for them and their children, then it creates an immense amount of anger, hostility, and fear. And unfortunately, when that is there, it allows for a subset of extremists to take advantage of the situation and who say, we have been hurt so much, these people are not taking us seriously, they don't listen to what we said, so we're going to do the most brutal, horrible thing to them. And this is not only this incident, it's been ongoing incidents. And then, of course, the responses to a group of people who do not certainly have the resources that Israel has, then to respond to that. I mean, nobody is right in this situation, but I think understanding how Palestinians feel, and even look today where you're having the destruction of Gaza and the home of so many people, and you're talking about telling 1 million or more people to evacuate in 24 or 36 hours, not allowing for the Red Cross or the other forms of disaster or war relief to enter the area. I mean, this is the most horrible thing in the world. The response should not be, let's destroy everything. It's, let's take those people who wish to live in peace and protect them, and then also deal with the issue of these terrorists. I mean, terrorism is a very hard thing to treat or to filter out or get rid of. But that doesn't justify the destruction of a group of people who had no hand in this either.
I'm curious if you have any solutions top of mind. What's coming to mind for me, I just watched an interview with Elon Musk yesterday. They spent a little time talking about this, and what Elon said as one solution is to cut off their supply of chickpeas because they won't be able to make hummus. And it was a joke, obviously, but just going along this line of solutions, I'm curious if you have any thoughts or opinions on that. I'm curious about how business leaders and leaders in general are talking about this topic.
Well, you know, we've seen how the media or different individuals immediately attack somebody who makes any commentary that appears to be anti-Semitic. And I certainly can appreciate that, because always lying in the shadows is a subgroup of individuals who are anti-Semitic and who seeing the pain of Jews actually elicits happiness, unfortunately. And certainly no one should in any way support any type of anti-Semitism. And again, who are you punishing? You know, it's like punishing people who have no responsibility for the situation. I mean, frankly, what we're talking about here is a political issue. And unfortunately, politics is often played through the lens of media to support or denigrate a politician. As an example, you know, we've seen all these protests for months and months against Netanyahu and his policies. And now with this disaster occurring, he has been let loose and is doing what he always intended, which is to destroy the Palestinians. And again, I will probably get a lot of commentary here, and I accept that. And I also accept that, it's possible my opinions are wrong. But based on what I know to date, or what I have read, I think most of my statements are valid here.
Yes, thank you for sharing that. And I think it's helpful for people to speak up and just share their opinions in general. So thank you for doing that.
Well, and I would also say that we have a responsibility to every human, and whether that's somebody who's starving in South Sudan or having atrocities inflicted on them anywhere, the righteous should stand up and put a stake in the sand that say enough is enough. And I think that not enough of us do that. Because it's easy to sit in our comfortable environment and criticize, but very few people will put themselves at risk. And this is why atrocities happen all over the world, because it's not the majority of the people who are causing it. Most people are reasonable people and want good in the world. It's typically people who have self-interest and perceive this as a way to benefit.
Well, thank you for your thoughts on that. It's definitely been the top of several people's minds, and I've been doing practices with some of my folks on how to work with vicarious trauma and, be a human in these difficult times. One of the amazing things that you are is the executive director of CCARE. And I know that you are currently recruiting for your next class of the Applied Compassion Program. Do you want to say a little bit about that? This is one of the things that's making the world a better place.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that. For your listeners who may not know, CCARE, the Center for Compassion and Altruism Research and Education at Stanford School of Medicine, one of our training programs is an 11-month-long certification program. We're not only do we, in a very in-depth manner, through experiential practice, teach you about compassion for self and others and a particular worldview of how to see the world, but we also offer mentorship to create a capstone project, which you're able to take back to your home organization. And as you may or may not know, the individuals who typically take this program are either from the corporate environment or from the healthcare space, or individuals in the mind, body, well-being space. And they represent people from over 40 countries, and in some instances 60 countries. So it's certainly a global program, and it's all online, to emphasize. But these capstone projects have, since the start of this program, I think it's now 3 or 4 years ago, have impacted over 1 million people through the programs that the students have developed. And in some ways, the goal here is to make compassion contagious and to demonstrate that, in fact, the world is actually filled with people who care. And I want to emphasize that while we see these horrible atrocities happening in different parts of the world, the vast, vast majority of people simply want to live their lives, to be happy, and to care for their families and those in their communities. They are not interested in, floating on $750 million yachts or having $10, $30 million homes all over the world. And perhaps we can have that discussion later. Most people, though, simply want to live their lives, have shelter, have food, and security. And if those are given to them, most people are very, very happy. I forgot, where were we going with this? What was your question? I got so involved.
Well, we're going to say once again that program is actively recruiting. And so if you
that's
want to
it.
be a part of bringing more compassion into the world, this is an excellent thing for you to look into. And we'll include that information in our show notes. And this is the time where we ask each of our guests about their own Techquanimity, how they create a balance for themselves in their own lives between the contemplative practices and just the uncertainty and maybe fast-pacedness that technology brings into our lives.
Well, I think technology, like everything in our lives, has positives and negatives, and we just have to understand that reality. And of course, strive to access and utilize those parts that allow for human thriving. Certainly, contemplative practice can be very powerful, but fundamentally, what we're talking about is an understanding of our self-agency and the power we have within ourselves. And I think that is really the most important thing. Certainly, contemplative practice is one practice, but there are other practices that can also give you this depth of wisdom and self-awareness. Some people, again, it has to be my way or the highway. The reality is there are a million highways that take us all to the same goal. And you just have to find one that resonates with who you are as a human being or where you are in your life. And sometimes it takes searching to find out what that practice is. But whatever the practice is, at the end of the day, it must be one that gives you insight, wisdom, self-awareness, and allows you to see yourself as an imperfect being and accept yourself, but also to see the other like you are, an imperfect being who's trying to do the best they can in this world. And when you're able to identify the other as yourself, it actually stops you from doing things that are not of service to the other.
That's a beautiful answer. Well, we just want to thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to hang out with us and bring some more compassion into the world. Thank you so much.
Well, thank the both of you. It's been a joy and a pleasure. You've given me this platform to pontificate, so that's always appreciated.
Thank you, Dr. Doty.
You guys take care.
Oh, that was a fun interview. One of my favorite takeaways from this is how he uses humor to pull himself out of like difficult moments, like ruminating thoughts. And, I need to remember that personally to not take myself so seriously sometimes, because I do get stuck in my ego, even if I am working on a company that is striving to bring more self-compassion into the world.
I particularly liked the reminder of becoming the observer of our thoughts, because we can get caught up in stress, and just taking a step back, looking at the bigger picture, putting yourself in the context and perspective of what's going on in the whole world definitely helps me. I'm sure it'll help other folks as well. So it was a great conversation. Looking forward to sharing it with more folks.
Me too. Well, thank you everybody for tuning into the Techquanimity podcast. And we're here every other Wednesday. And I think that's it.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.